His Excellency, the President of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, Mr. Hamid Karzai, His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Turkey, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to you all. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Allow me to welcome you all to the interactive sessions on how democratic global governance contributes to international peace and security. The sessions, as you may know, will be the first among 3 interactive sessions that will be held in the second day of the 5th Bali Democracy Forum. The topic of this interactive session is, in a way, an elaboration of the general theme of the 5th BDF, which is based on the premise that there must be a parallel between our democratic work at the national level with that of at the global level, with a view to make democratic principles work actively, not only in our respective regions, but also in a global setting. We are honored to have with us today President Hamid Karzai and Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the leaders of the 2 most dynamic democracies in their respective regions. On behalf of the Indonesian government, allow me to thank President Karzai and Prime Minister Erdogan for gracing us with their presence, and their insights and thoughts would be very much invaluable to all of us. At this juncture, allow me to highlight some pertinent issues that you might want to consider as we enter into these discussions. To start with, we might want to identify and discuss the challenges and drawbacks of the current global governance faces in the maintenance of international peace and security. In this light, we must, of course, bear in mind the critique that the current state of global governance still remains far from being democratic, inclusive, and representative to the aspirations of the bulk of the international community. Secondly, it would be pertinent to address the nexus between having more democratic global governance and how it can positively contribute to international peace and security. Most importantly, our discussion can ultimately be directed towards identifying the necessary steps to jumpstart the process of democratizing global governance. The choice of this theme is based on the premise, as I said, that we need, yes, to promote democracy at national and regional level, but nonetheless, it is equally important to promote democracy at the global level, and in particular in the system of global governance. Not to take any more of your time, allow me to now invite the distinguished panelists to share their thoughts on this issue. We'll start with President Hamid Karzai. As President, you may have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan Virayuda. I'm very pleased to be here today among all of you ladies and gentlemen to talk about an issue of such tremendous importance to us all, the citizens of this world. And before I go to express my views, I'm very, very happy to have here the presence of my brother, Prime Minister Erdogan, who yesterday spoke in detail about the problems of global governance and how it negatively affects us all. From my perspective, as a citizen of Afghanistan and also as a citizen of the world, and as we all know, I don't think we have anything new to say here today, in addition to what we have already discussed. Global governance is definitely not democratic. It is definitely not institutionally able to address the numerous difficulties that we face in today's world, from conflict resolution to addressing issues of a multilateral importance, to addressing issues of significance to the entire world community, and also the more important immediate questions of peace and security for the world. As I see it, of course, the reform of the UN system, the way the UN Security Council functions, and then the relationship of the Security Council to the General Assembly, the IMF, the World Bank. The World Bank president is, do you hear me? The World Bank president is always appointed by the United States. IMF is always appointed by the European Union. The emerging economies in the world who don't have as much share as they should have in these appointments, and then countries like us, Afghanistan, and who are not economically or in terms of the political power that we have, big players on the international scene, but still would like to carry a vote in these international institutions, world institutions. These are problems that we have known for decades now and have lived with for decades now. The question today is whether things can go on as usual, whether it can be agreed with and continue living with, regardless of it having the ability to address international problems or in case disputes arise, as we have now been witnessing in parts of the world. So in my opinion, and to cut my remarks short, we have very serious issues that we have to resolve. The climate change affecting us all, the overuse of the Mother Earth, the way some of us do it, and then our lack of ability to address that overuse, the problem of the international citizen in his or her daily life, two states and the issues that states have, to conflicts that we have. All of these require a rethinking of the way we solve problems, the way we run international institutions. And I believe it is time now to address it in an effective way, especially where the big decision makers are involved, where their decisions can bring about a change. And I believe those big decision makers should think and are in the right circumstances to think of a changed approach to global governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Karzai, for sharing your thoughts. And I invite Prime Minister Erdogan to take the floor. Excellency, you have the floor.
Sayın Başkan, değerli misafirler, değerli dostum, Sayın Cumhurbaşkanı Karzai, öncelikle dün birçok küresel yönetişimle ilgili düşüncelerimizi sizlerle paylaşma fırsatını bulduk. Bundan dolayı tabii özellikle değerli dostum Erdoğan'a çok teşekkür ediyorum. Burada değerlendirmemizi yaparken geçen yüzyılla bu yüzyıla girişi birbiriyle bir ilişkisi nedir? Bunun üzerinde kısa bir durmak gerekiyor. Geçen yüzyılın ilk yarısı özellikle çatışmaların, savaşların olduğu bir ilk yarı. Tabii bunun getirdiği ikinci yarıyla ilgili sıkıntılar var ve bu sıkıntılara karşı neler yapılabilir, ne gibi adımlar atılabilir? Bunun üzerinde yapılan çalışmalarda da görüyoruz ki birçok uluslararası kuruluşlar tesis edilmeye, inşa edilmeye başlandı. Ve 21. yüzyıla girerken dünyanın gelişmiş ülkeleri özellikle şunu konuşuyorlardı. 21. yüzyıl bir küresel barışın inşa edildiği yüzyıl olmalı. Peki küresel barışı ne üzerine inşa edeceğiz dediğimizde tabii bu eksikliği giderebilmek için de geçmişteki yaşanan felaketlerden alınan dersle ne gibi adımlar atabiliriz? Bunun üzerinde çalışmalar yapıldı. Tabii burada siyaset olsun, ekonomi olsun, güvenlik alanlarındaki yaşanan sıkıntılar olsun, bütün bunlar bu değerlendirmelerde yerini alıyor. Ve Birleşmiş Milletler'in dikkat edersek, kurucu şartına baktığımız zaman orada bu kendini buluyor. Nedir? İnsanlığın barışı orada kendini buluyor. İnsanlığın huzuru orada kendini buluyor. Ve temel felsefede insan hakları, insan onurunun korunması ve büyük uluslarla küçüklerinin eşit şartlarda bir yaşam ortaya koyabilmesi burada yerini alıyor. Tabii bu bir hak eşitliğiydi. Bu orada ifadesini bulduğu şekliyle yaşama geçirilebildi mi? Buna baktığımızda ne yazık ki orada ifade edildiği şekliyle bu yaşama geçirilemedi. Bu uygulamada görüyoruz. Hele hele İkinci Dünya Savaşı sonrasında hakim olan Soğuk Savaş dengeleri içinde bu idealleri hakkıyla hayata geçirme konusunda önemli eksiklikler ortaya çıktı. Bu dönemde uluslararası siyaset ve güvenlik yapılarında demokratiklik, katılımcılık ve kapsayıcılık ilkeleri çoğunlukla tutuklu düzenin stratejik çıkar hesaplarının bölgesinde kaldı.
Left in the shadow of the bipolar world and the interests in that type of world. The winds of democracy started to blow only after the 1970s. And with the downfall of the Iron Curtain, the search for democracy was intensified. So it began with Latin America and then other regions of the world. Of course, we had a number of manifestations in the Middle East as well more recently. So in that process, about more than half of the international community started having representative democracies in place. And this, of course, made populations much more hopeful about the future. And this is something that we witnessed at the moment. And we actually experience this emotion, these feelings as a first-hand experience when we come into contact with different communities. They finally are capable of saying that my voice or our voices are heard, and the parties or the people I back are now coming into power. This transformation that we're talking about is, of course, it has to do with increasing the capacity of international institutions in terms of responding to the needs of different communities. And we talked about these yesterday. The United Nations system is of tremendous importance because all countries of the world are members, almost all of them are members of the United Nations system. But unfortunately, what is the level of efficiency or effectiveness of other nations other than the 5 members of the United Nations Security Council? It is up to what would come out of the 2 lips of, if you like, of the 5 countries that sit at the United Nations Security Council. When they impose a veto or on something, one of the or more of these countries, then it becomes impossible for you to achieve any tangible and concrete outcome. And that is why the United Nations has been unable to solve the issue between Israel and Palestine for many years, or the Gaza issue, for instance, or in Somalia, you see that the United Nations system is lacking, and in Myanmar right now, the United Nations system is hopeless. But the United Nations exists to solve such issues. When will it come into effect? When will it take a step? On the other hand, you have the IMF. How does IMF help a country? When does it help a country? And under what circumstances does it help a country? These are very important points. And will the world be run under the influence of a currency, under the inflationary pressures that are tied to a certain currency, or should we rather focus on, for instance, something like gold, which is independent of national currencies and which has preserved its importance throughout history? Why don't we make a transition into towards this direction? This is something I've always wondered. And although IMF is shown as a recipe for many countries for an exit out of difficult situations, you see that there are also some negative circumstances associated with the IMF. For instance, for the last 3 periods, we do not have a standoff agreement with the IMF. And when we came into power, the debt of Turkey to IMF was about $23.5 billion. Now all we have left is $1.3 billion, and we are going to completely pay this debt off in April next year. But we hope that IMF becomes an institution that would provide the necessary funds to countries which are in a difficult situation. But at the moment, as we stand, this is not the case, and I think this is a transformation that we need to achieve. Both the United Nations, the OECD, or the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, for instance. These institutions should be revised, if you like, in order to better improve their capacities and capabilities. We need this type of reform so that we would achieve a concrete improvement in global governance. Thank you.
The core institutions of global governance also in the political field. And my question is, what is your view on what to do with the right to veto? Because if we look at the crisis in Syria, the problem right there is not the absence of new members, but is the existence and the use of the veto. And on practical terms, if we expand the number of members of the Security Councils, should the new members also have a right to veto? And wouldn't that mean that there are more dangers of further vetoes? Would you accept an expansion to permanent members without the veto? Or should we address the whole issue of the right to veto in the first place? And I'd very much like to hear Prime Minister Erdogan's perspective on that.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Any other participants who wish to give their comments or pose their questions? Am I right that New Zealand has requested?
That's Philippines, I believe.
Philippines. Or Philippines? This room is too big for me to easily recognize.
It's Palestine, yeah.
Palestine, yes. And next, Germany, yeah. Please, Excellency.
Thank you, Excellency. Let me first thank His Excellency President Karzai and our brother Tayyip Erdogan for referring to Palestine in 2 occasions, yesterday and today, which is a quite clear example for how unjust the global governance system is. maybe you would like to know also that this month we are trying to enhance or upgrade, if you like, our status in this global governance system within the UN system. This is a clear case, actually, not because it belongs to us, because it's quite evidence about how unjust the system is. How come that we as Palestine are now having embassies in 132 countries, recognized fully by those member countries of the UN, plus others who are willing actually to deal with us as an independent country. But still one particular country could veto all this together and say, no, I don't want this. Even if I want this, I want it through a certain process. My question is, how long we are going to bear this situation, and how much the international system could really bring justice to nations who are remained, hostage to a willing of one country or another for its own domestic, maybe, politics, or for its own national interest. I mean, this is really now becoming too much disappointing and frustrating to so many nations. It's not about us. We are quite little a nation, as you know, but it's poisoning the international relation at large. It's poisoning the whole, if you like, the tranquility and the peace within the whole world. It brought already so many wars in our region, and still the international community cannot address such a conflict, which is much beyond the Israelis and the Palestinians per se. I mean, how long, Your Excellencies, think that the majority of nations can do something and materialize their politics? Out of the 132 countries, I would name that 9 out of 10, the most populous countries, are among those. So we talk about 80% almost, of not 90% of the total population of the whole world on one side, and one particular country could say no and finish.
We got your point, Excellency.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. And the third would be Germany. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to both panelists for the very thought-provoking remarks this morning. My question goes also to both panelists, with your kind permission. We have heard thought-provoking and very well-founded criticism about the non-inclusiveness, the inefficiency of, let's call it, our modern interstate structure. I'm always a bit careful to use the word democracy in relationship to an interstate system, but I think we talk about the same things. Now, let me provoke a little bit and say, yes, you are criticizing the inefficiency of the IMF, of the Security Council above all. However, if you look around, our nations are discussing for 20 years Security Council reform. We are stuck in many areas, and that's not the responsibility of 1 or even 5 nations alone. Point 2, if you look at the record of the Security Council, and I open a bracket here, you know that Germany wants to be a permanent member if possible, and that we are hard working for a Security Council reform, bracket closed. So if you look at the record of the Security Council over the last 2 decades, there has been a remarked improvement over the record they had until 1990. There are some conflicts, yes, where the Security Council fails, maybe for some good reasons, maybe for very bad reasons. Question to you, 2 panelists, as I said. Point 1, do you see any way out how to reform, let's say, the 2 bodies, Security Council and IMF, because they were mentioned? And secondly, in the meantime, what are practical ways? Are you favoring coalitions of the willing, more groups like G7, G8, G20, which are, let's say, designed to cover certain interests and needs? So what would you recommend to do to get out of the stalemate, of the quagmire we are in with regard to many reforms? These were rather personal remarks, not necessarily on behalf of my government, but still, these are my questions.
Well, I'll first go to the issue of Palestine, our brothers. we fully agree with you that the method of application of a vote and the right of veto in the Security Council, using such a vote is highly, highly undemocratic and needs to be reformed. How to reform that is the next question from Germany that I can go to. But, sir, in your remarks, you referred to national interest. And incidentally, I had national interest as one of the issues in my notes to talk about. I believe the main culprit in the lack of democracy in global governance is the concept of national interest and the definition of national interest. When we speak of national interest, this means my interest against the interest of someone else. And if my interest against the interest of someone else is in conflict with that other interest, then I continue pressing for my interest. That means I don't agree with the point of view of the other side, and I continue to remain committed to the gains that I have in the name of my national interest at the cost of others. This concept has to change. Now, I don't know at this session, since there's a serious lack of time, if we can address this. And that is basically the problem that we have in global governance. On the right of Palestine to the membership of the United Nations, we fully agree with you. And that one veto is definitely not right. And I hope that one country will change its stand and allow you to be a member. On the question of the reform of the Security Council, and the IMF, the respected representative of Germany asked, well, there are so many ways. Since we all agree that there has to be a reform of the Security Council and a reform of the other world organizations and bodies, and in particular the reform of the Security Council, we have to find a way. Is it based on economic power? And there are new powers on the scene. Germany is one of them for a long time and quite a deserving power. Do we do it by regional arrangement? Do we do it by population and economy? Indonesia qualifies for that. India qualifies for that. And other countries qualify for that. Do we do it regionally? Or do we do it continental-wise? Or do we go more sectarian and ethnic in this? Do we do it religious-wise or by all other forms of definition? Is the question that all of us ask. In my opinion, we have to have a combination of the region and the economies and the contributors in that manner of finding a solution to the problems of the Security Council. We can't all be there. We can't all be there. But some of us have to be there, and those of us that are there must represent the rest of us properly and in a democratic and rather egalitarian way, to the extent that human nature allows.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, Prime Minister.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ben de değerli Cumhurbaşkanı Karzai kardeşimin ifade ettiği gibi Norveç, Filistin ve Almanya'nın bu sorularda müşterek yanları var. Tabii önce temel soruya biraz farklı yaklaşım ortaya koyacağım. O da şudur. Ben Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'nde daimi ve geçici üyelik gibi bir ayrımın olmasına karşı bunun yanlış olduğu inancındayım. Olacaksa tamamıyla bütün üyelerin hepsinin Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Kurulu'nun veya Birleşmiş Milletler'in kurucu şartında olduğu gibi
just as it was mentioned in the founding charter, of the United Nations, the rights should be equal between the grand nations and the smaller nations. With that being the case, all of the members should be permanent members to the Security Council. There should be a rotative change within the Security Council. It could be a method to follow. All of these members can rotate and change on an annual basis, and all of the members could enjoy the same rights as their predecessors in order to participate in the governance of the entire global order. Look at the permanent seat holders of the Security Council. You can only see 3 continents present. You have the United States, or the American continent, if you will. You have Europe, and you have Asia. What about the other continents of the globe? Are they being represented? No. How about the religious groups? You might wonder whether all the religious groups are being represented within the permanent seat holders. No. Then how is it possible for us to expect justice to prevail within the Security Council? Because the resolutions are usually reached upon within an ideological way of approaching concerns. If those decisions are being taken from an ideological perspective, there's a great contradiction to the founding principles of the United Nations. Let me give you a very brief and a simple example. We have our Palestinian brothers here. It's quite clear. Until so far, the United Nations Security Council and the United Nations General Assembly has decided upon various resolutions. But despite all these resolutions, none of them had ever been implemented actively. Israel never respected those resolutions. So what happens then? Within the framework of the founding principles of the United Nations, I believe we have to incorporate this one fact. In case of not respecting the resolutions of the United Nations Security Council, there should be certain sanctions imposable. That is the issue that we lack right now. You can crush the weak with sanctions in this current order, but otherwise it's not possible. 133 countries right now recognize Palestine as a state, and it is said that as of next year, within the United Nations, these member states will see Palestine being represented as a recognized state. And they are alerting the United Nations to their presence as of next year. But then you look at the specific powers of the United Nations, stating that this is a very premature initiative and it needs to be postponed. I wonder, 133 countries recognize Palestine, and only one of the permanent seat holders of the Security Council say no, and all the rest follow that approach. So why are we postponing this, depending on the ideas of just one permanent seat holders? We were speaking about a dual state solution within the Middle East. We were speaking about Palestine state and the Israeli state. With that being the question, why are we not taking that step forward? Why are we not recognizing Palestine as a member of the United Nations? Because Israel says no. As that is the case, some other member states follow Israel, and if those followers are permanent seat holders of the Security Council, the job is done. Whether it be 133, whether it be 185, whether it be 189. If a country says no, no advancement could be possible. So we need justice to prevail within the Security Council. We as the politicians need to be quite just and fair. Another example, it's quite interesting to see. Quite recently about IMF, and I believe we have seen negative approaches to this issue within Germany. The monetary support provided by IMF, the German nation says, the German people say, they are spending their money on a union where budgets are being spent ridiculously. They all want the nations to stand on their own feet, and the approach of the people, if we should be very just and fair, is quite accurate. IMF is allocating funds in an unlimited fashion, and those funds are not being wisely used. And some of the nations and some of the parts of the world lack the resources they need to restructure themselves. Another issue that I'd like to discuss with you has got something to do with the terror question on a global scale. When it comes to terror, about international terrorism, we still have not forged a common platform of struggle. Afghanistan is a part of this question, Pakistan is a part of this question, and Turkey is a part of this question as well. Struggling against terrorism is prone to many problems in this day and age, and fighting against terrorism still encounters a mentality where some people defend their terrorists, believing that their terrorists are better, and your terrorists are worse, or the vice versa. Right now, in Syria, a violence is going on. That violence is being conducted by the head of the state. And while that violence is still going on, industries or trade routes are being bombed, and the United Nations still remain quiet. I wonder how much we could go on without doing anything. Where are the permanent seat holders of the United Nations Security Council? When are they going to take up the risk? 50,000 people had been killed in Syria. And about 300,000 refugees are outside of their countries. 2.5 million people have had to evict their homes. And when are we going to take a stand as human beings and extend a helping hand to the people of Syria? The same thing can be applied to Somalia, and the same thing can be applied to Myanmar. The same problems get repeated over and over again, and we need to adopt a common will, a common attitude towards these questions. So as long as we refrain from doing that, it is impossible to speak about the democratic structure of a prospective global governance. Democratic will is not the political will. In Norway, there have been an incident. A madman took a stand and killed 77 Norwegian citizens. It was just a single individual. A single madman. But the response to that, 21 years of imprisonment. And I was really curious. I asked, how is it possible that you end up getting 21 years of imprisonment after having murdered brutally 77 people? What's going to happen in 21 years of time? They're going to get out. That person is going to get out. And I was answered by saying, no, he's not going to get out of the prison. He will be subject to another 21 years of imprisonment. I don't believe that. This is a question we have to solve. In Europe, capital punishment has been eliminated. But it has not been eliminated in the United States, nor in China, nor in Japan. And there is something right about capital punishment. This brings me to consider this. 77 people have been murdered by one individual, and he's going to be 3.1 years later. And I don't think that the conscience of the people, of the families of the people that were killed, is not relieved. So we have to reconsider our ways, and we have to reconsider the way we believe justice will prevail in the globe in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for your response. The topic that we discussed this morning is a very important topic, a big issue, in fact. But it's unfortunate that time alone is a handicap to our discussion today. So we have now arrived at the conclusions of these interactive sessions, and I would like to once again express my thanks and appreciation, in particular to our distinguished panelists, President Hamid Karzai and Prime Minister Erdogan, as well as to all participants who have participated these interactive sessions. My apology for not giving you more time to pose questions and put your comments. I would now, with your permissions, Excellencies, distinguished participants, to adjourn the sessions. And once again, I thank you very much.
Excellent. Excellent.
The President of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the Prime Minister of Turkey are leaving the room. You are kindly requested to rise, please.